Yeah, it's very exciting to hear the experts in these fields. A little bit from more technological and application side. So we are trying to solve the small problems, which we can. And it was, of course, very interesting right now to hear about the deep theory behind the behavior of people. Probably it's all going on in the data, but it's difficult to see in the end. So the data I'm talking about comes from the workforce labor market, so the labor market. And what I argue is that we have imminent crisis coming. Yeah, right, doesn't, okay, yeah. But as everybody knows, it's very difficult to predict the future. And at the moment, what I can tell is that in Germany, the crisis is already full-blown and it will only get worse. But if you look at the studies, then actually there are already indications that the problem is quite extensive. And the problem is that not robots will take away our jobs, but rather there is not enough humans to fill the jobs. And there will be not enough humans. We are just not going in the right direction. And I think that it's very similar in a way to the environmental crisis. Let's look back 10, 20 years, and the world was still in a limbo, and like we don't know if really there is a problem, and many people still ignore it. But with the labor market, the situation is very similar developing. So, for example, here's some opinions. First is that by 2030, I mean, every prediction which is longer than 2030, nobody will trust anyway, but for the next 10 years, we see that the situation will worsen. And the hopes of pandemics may be steering the market and economies. And first we were thinking, oh, okay, because of COVID, there is no mobility, no immigration, there is everything is worse. There is a shortage of health workers, but as soon as pandemics will be over, everything will get back to normal, but it didn't happen. Actually, post-pandemic, the situation developed even worse than expected, and there are several understood reasons for that. But let me say what is the main reason that we have shortage of humans, of working humans globally, is of course because we are getting older. We live long, thanks God, and thanks technology that we live long, and unfortunately we don't have enough children. So I don't even know if this is a solution to get more children and to have, instead of 7 billion, maybe 70 billion humans on this planet. That's also a question, if it's really what we want to do. So the problem is that in 10 years, there will be much more humans than working humans, and this is the root of the problem. This exists across nations. As I mentioned, in Germany, we see it every day, but it's also in Britain, in Australia, in Brazil, in Italy, in Canada, and it is now one of the biggest problems starting in China, actually. In the US, we see it in some sectors already prominently, but even the US Bureau of Labor Statistics is predicting it will get worse across sectors. I don't know, for example, where they plan to get another 500,000 cooks in a restaurant in the next 10 years. But it's even worse with 100,000 nurses, because they cannot even import nurses. Everybody needs nurses, and the immigration will not solve the problem. It can only make the security risks worse when we will start fighting for people between nations. That's also across sectors. Some things which come to mind, like instantly the worst is the health. The World Health Organization already screaming about it since decades. We have obvious crisis of health workers. But also cybersecurity seems to be a huge issue, because in generalism, mathematics and IT skills are rare. And we don't only talk about human labor potential, but also the skills in this demand, and the construction workers. And what people don't realize is that there is a risk for other workers if there are not enough workers. Let's think about these overloaded nurses who become mental problems because they're overworked, or construction workers if they work too long and they're too tired and they have incidents. So just some things which are already going on. And I'm not a social science specialist. That's why I hope in the discussion we can discuss if the securization is already happening, if this is already a security risk, or is it still a political issue, and what solutions and political solutions are possible and necessary. What I can talk about is the technological solutions. I would prefer that this risk will not turn into a security issue. If we can, with technology, maybe prevent the biggest problems, then I think this is a win for every nation globally. And technologically, one can see these directions: boosting productivity and effectivity of each worker, enabling long-distance collaboration, like telemedicine, for example. That's, of course, for example, interesting thing. But here I will mention the other tools, which I'm marked with stars, is not because they're better, but it's because what I do, and I can tell you about more details, is optimizing the effectiveness of the recruiting process and increasing the participation of underrepresented groups. We know that, for example, educated women leave workforce, or immigrants have barriers to be introduced into the workforce, and disabled people, and I don't talk about the full disability, but even somebody who has difficulty reading or writing is often excluded, has barriers even finding a job. So we can work on these things, and this is small steps, but they can make a big impact. And for example, what I mean by the effectiveness of the recruiting process, Milch and Zucker is a company where I work. We apply artificial intelligence to optimize this process. We know that privately, for a person to have the fitting employment is an existential issue. Personally, for a person, it can be hardly worse than not being needed. And this need to be needed was fulfilled in old times by, for example, religion. Now need to be needed is most often fulfilled by a job. And so being stuck in a wrong employment is one of the worst things which can happen to a person privately. But for a company to have the wrong people is also one of the worst things. The worse than that can only be not having enough people. So what data I can use is that we can see how people in the web react to the job advertisements of our clients. Now everything happens, of course, in the web. So the advantage is that I see the behavior of real people, not only students, and I can only confirm what Vlad says, that all experiments until now, they have been done with students. And it's very difficult to extrapolate the behavior of a student who just pretends to look for a job and has to answer a few questions, and then to look at real people. So what we see is, for example, that in Germany, sorry, this is in German, but statistics from Germany, is that it takes sometimes more than half a year to fill a vacancy for the IT job. We simultaneously see that a person can spend months looking for a job, even somebody with skills. This is somewhere where we can improve. So we can also optimize the duration of the process so that the right job and the right person meet each other faster. And that will also save a lot for the companies and for people, of course, obviously. So the economical importance of this optimization is very high. That's, of course, important for the company who pays me because they can earn money with these solutions, but societally, this is also an improvement. We use for that analysis of texts, because most interaction happens in textual form. The video interviews, for example, are an interesting fashion, but didn't establish itself yet. So most communication happens in written. So we analyze language with natural language processing, with, I don't know why PowerPoint destroyed here was a minus, it's a mistake. Very strange. He keeps correcting it wrong. So it's important to see that we can transform words into mathematical objects. Can be vectors or matrices, tensors generally, and we can then use this mathematics in analysis. So that computers can understand language. And what we use this computers on is, for example, to improve matching of candidates, as I said, so that they don't look for each other for 6 months. If a candidate is looking for a job, often people self-filter opportunities, especially women, that I have to admit that women are overcritical to themselves and often decide that, no, this job is too fancy for me, or I will not manage, I'm not the best candidate, so I will not even try. So what we try is to reduce the barriers by making matching based on only qualifications without this pre-screening by a person, and simultaneously we try to reduce biases in recruiters, because recruiting agencies or companies, they are also selecting candidates subconsciously, not based on really important criteria, but of their perception. But to that I will come more. So what is also important for the computer to make this in the best possible way is that it should understand not only single words, but the whole sentences. So our models understand the words in the structure of a sentence. And here I have one small demonstration from actual program which we have written, but it's in German. It works in German. So I translated for you my example vacancy description. So it's a job advertisement. It says, we offer training as a baker. Google translated, DeepL translated, it's very bad. I can translate it a little bit better. So basically, we are looking for somebody with a degree in computer science and experience as a baker. We offer benefits of, for example, fresh bread from a baker, and the contact person is called John Baker. So the problem obviously is that I use the word baker many times in different contexts, and the trick is that the computer understands that it's not the same baker. Apparently it also understands in which context baker is a skill and in which context it's a benefit, in which context it's a name. So that works well, and this is why we can even learn from the data automatically when something new happens in the world. If the baker will have to not only have a degree in computer science, but also know how to program a quantum computer, then our program will learn it automatically from the data and will add another skill to our list. So this is not as crazy a joke as it sounds, because I think that in the future, most bakers will not work with the dough with hands, but they will program machines to do that. So it's actually expected that they have a computer science degree. So this is what we reached so far, and that helps us make a matching better. But now there is another program which we introduced to the market, which is helping reduce bias. As I said, there is a subconscious bias also in recruiters. Even before they see a candidate, any candidate, they already incorporated the bias into the formulation of the job advertisement. And that's interesting because the web job posts will be also filtered by the recommendation engines. If I see an advertisement for a job, then maybe it is shown to me by a Google ad or by Facebook ad or Instagram or Twitter. Anyhow, somehow I have seen this ad because some recommendation agent decided that it fits me, even before I decided anything. And that is based on the formulation of the job ad. It really has been measured that the job advertisements for taxi drivers were shown by Facebook in the US more often to the Mexican origin people. And this is something which we have to take into account. If we want to really reduce bias in the pre-selection, we have to work at the origin, at the formulation of the vacancy and of the job ad. So somebody said, very clever, that there is no more effective barrier for a job than not even telling that the job exists. So basically, we want to be sure that this will be shown to everybody. And we used some psychological theories in order to analyze the language usage, and we formulated then sentiment of a text so that if it's very manly described or very static language, then we consider it bias enhancing. And we try to remove it by suggesting to the recruiters to reformulate particular sentences. And they have to a little bit work on the text, because in the end, it's the decision of the recruiter what to write, really. We have measured them in the web with a test of, not on students, but on real people, on 1,000 visitors to the job ads of our clients, that we could definitely increase the number of applications by just reformulating the text. And what we didn't know before is that men are also susceptible to this sentiment. The studies on students, which have been done by psychologists before, in a little bit smaller contingents, but there were studies in multiple universities, they have seen effect on women, that women were more ready to apply if the language was more debiased. But it was always assumed that the men either are neutrally or maybe even scared away by too soft formulations. Our data have shown that actually women and men both are more eager to apply if the text is debiased, if the text is not using some strongly manly connotated words, which is very usual for job ad text actually to have it. Yeah, so let me see if I have still some time. Do I have some minutes, Jeremy? Yeah, 2 minutes. Okay, so I will jump into the important part. So this is just some introduction why we use exactly AI, because it is powerful and great, but it has problems. And here, let me show a huge difference between two different problems. One problem is statistical error, but who doesn't have it? That is a small problem of artificial intelligence uses a lot of probabilities and a lot of statistical methods. So of course there is statistical error, but sometimes mistake can be done, but we know approximately how often. What is much more complicated is a systematical error. And if we look at one of the best AI models of the market right now, DALL-E, which produces images, and you can even test it yourself. If you ask DALL-E to produce some images of a flight attendant, even a flight attendant is a gender neutral description, it will only have women. And if you will ask it for pictures of lawyers, even lawyer is okay, ER, then, but in principle it's gender neutral. So it will have only male lawyers. A similar bias is also in the text production, in the best text production model at the moment. Why is it there? Because of the training data. If we see, for example, in Google, just find me images of a teacher, most of it will be women, even though teacher is a gender neutral description. And this is not produced by AI. These are just normal images found on the internet. This is our bias as humans. We as humans, when we write an article on the internet or a blog about a teacher, we show a photo of a woman. But if you look at this exactly, you will see that approximately 15% of the photos are men. But in DALL-E, 100% are biased. And this is not okay. That AI enhances the bias. it's clear why, because a computer doesn't have as many parameters as nature. It has to reduce the representation space, and it cuts something away and concentrates on the most important parameters. And then, of course, these biases which are in our data are enhanced to the maximum, and that can lead to very terrible consequences, like AI, which was sentencing dark-skinned people, or which was not offering jobs to women, high-paid jobs, or which suddenly transforms Barack Obama into a white guy, because of this enhancement of the biases seen in the data. So I don't know really how to solve the problem, but there are some ideas how to control the technology. And I think that the crisis of labor force is there. So we cannot afford to ignore this technology. We have to use it, but we have to use it cleverly and control it. So we cannot just say existential crisis, so everything is allowed. And I thank Jeremy, among other scientific collaborators, so very much enjoying doing science together with universities. And I have prepared even some discussion questions for the questions and answers, so that we can go through later maybe. Thank you very much.